So let me introduce Anand. And Anand, to start with, thank you very much for agreeing to spend some time with all of us and sharing your learnings. Anand and I go a long, long way back. I've known Anand when he was what? A toddler. Actually, I attended his parents' wedding. So I've known his parents since before they were born. He was born, and I've known Anand, well, since he was born. And been a keen observer of the journey that he briefly spoke about, his schooling. He's a great sports person because his dad used to force him to play. And maybe he'll bring out some aspects of what he's learned on the sports field and how he's taken it to business. And then in his younger days, he joined Glenfiddich, and I got some free invites to some of the great events that he organized where I got some great free liquor. And then I heard he'd given up, and this is something that even he doesn't know. He did send me a business plan when he was starting Nao Spirits and Beverages. And while in the last session I spoke about how I made 70 plus investments, if you had asked me any investment I regret not making, and I would have told you that time that I circulated his deck to people who I thought knew the beverage industry, and by the time they got back to me, he had already moved on. So it's one of my biggest regrets that I did not invest in his company and continue to play the bigger role on that. So Anand and I have spent a little bit of time putting together this session so that he brings out the learnings that he has. There are a lot of relevant learnings that I think will be applicable to what you guys will enjoy hearing and learn from it. Just to synopsize what Anand is all about, he's a CEO and co-founder of Nao Spirits and Beverages, the makers of India's first craft gin. He spent 10 years in the alcohol beverages industry. He says it without having to use this as a tongue twister. And for me, it's always a tongue twister which way he says it. He has huge experience as a marketer, as a producer, and as an entrepreneur. A lot of his experience has shaped his approach. And I think some of the approaches he used and the learnings he used, I've requested him to showcase that, to bring out the nuances of that. And he did give out a couple of readings that he thought he would use as a base to build upon on what we do here. So with that, Anand, welcome. I know I'm looking forward to this session. I don't know if the other 59 people logged on here are right now or not, but I think we'll have some fun sharing some of your learnings. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Firstly, it's an absolute honor. Who would have thought this would happen when I was, I think probably at your house 30 years ago, jumping on your bed with your daughters. So I mean, this is great. Good to see everyone here. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. I've not done this. I've not spoken to a class. I've been more accustomed to being on the other side and listening to others. So do forgive me if I fumble and mumble around. We spoke about this a couple of days ago, and we thought potentially the best way to do this and the best way to approach this would be to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what the industry is, a fairly unique industry. It is one of two industries in India which is somehow and for some reason excluded from the whole GST gambit. So just give you a little overview on what the industry looks like, and then talk about my journey and our collective journey, and then finally end with talk about prototyping and testing and our experience with that. What have we done with that? What have we learned from that? So yeah, but feel free to ask questions. I think we'll break in between each of those three segments just to be able to kind of do a quick Q&A. If that's fine, if there are no questions, that's fine. I mean, we can keep going into the next session as well. It just so happens that given the time of this thing, I'm still at the distillery. So what's behind me is where we make all of our gin. So I saw a comment, Krishna, thank you. I don't know if you're old enough to be drinking the gin, but I don't know if any of you are old enough to be drinking the gin. But if you are, great, let's just say, I don't approve of it at all, right? None of you should be drinking. But if you are, thank you. So it's been a great journey. And legal age is 21. Is everyone 21 here? Yes? Yes, okay, it's fine. You don't have to answer. We're greater than 21. Okay, great. Thanks. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, it's a long winding journey. So I'll try and keep it brief because, how does a commerce student become a distiller, and actually learn to operate one of these things behind me, and actually somehow make a business out of that, right? Doing something that, it's quite geeky and fun. And, it's not something that I'd ever thought, even being in the industry for 10 years, I'd never thought that I'd be able to, kind of take the reins on for a brand and actually make the liquid that goes inside, right? It's one of those things that you never think is going to happen, but somehow it has. But to rewind back, to give you a quick overview on the industry, it is the alcobev space and the wine and spirits industry, as I call it, simply because we don't deal with beer at all. But India is one of the largest spirits markets in the world, right? We have, I think, 300 million cases of spirits consumed every year. One case is 9 liters. So if, typically about 12 bottles is one case, right? So you can do the maths there. That's a lot of spirit, right? What is spirit? Spirit is different from beer, is different from wine, right? Beer is at 5%, 6%, 8%, depending on what you're drinking. Wine is typically 12 to 14% ABV, which is alcohol by volume. So how strong is something? Spirit is something which has to be distilled in a pot still, very much like the one behind me. And you get to something in the bottle, which is at about 40 to 45% ABV. Okay, so quite strong. Usually you need to have it with something else, water, ice, soda, tonic, all of that stuff, right? You don't need to tell you this. I'm assuming you all know this. But in the grander scheme of things, gin, despite all the hullabaloo around it recently, is still less than 1% of the spirits market. In fact, white spirits in India is less than 3% of the spirits market. So what are people drinking? No surprise. Majority is drinking whiskey, brandy, and rum, right? But the kind of pinch of salt with which to take that kind of a statistic, because, stats are great, right? We love them, right? Especially in business school, we loved stats. In businesses, we love stats. But to look at that number, and lots of companies, lots of multinational companies have looked at that number and said, wow, 300 million cases, right? Imagine if you can get 1% of that. We'll be selling 3 million cases and that's it, job done, right? It's a lot harder than that. It's that same, oh wow, I'm much bigger. It's that same philosophy of, someone going and saying, oh, there's 1 billion people in China, let's sell each one of them 1 tube of toothpaste and we would have sold 1 million units. It's not that easy, right? Most of what is sold in India is at the lower rung. So is your country liquor, it's your IMFL, but value products, right? So things which are costing 100 rupees, 150 rupees, 200 rupees a bottle, right? So position that against, us, where greater than in Delhi sells at about 1,000 rupees a bottle. It's a totally different planet. And like it or not, the bulk is at that. So I would say about 95% of the total, 300 million case market is really at the value end. Right? Most people, and we do this in our training sessions, we say, listen, what's the largest selling whiskey in the world? Do you guys know? Anyone? Go ahead, put that in your chat, put that in the chat. See if you can guess what's Old Monk. Old Monks are rum, but what's the largest selling whiskey in the world? Wow, Johnny Walker, Jack Daniels. Typically the answers that we get, right? JD, Stag, interesting. Imperial Blue, yeah, actually, so it varies from year on year. It's always an Indian brand. 3 years ago, it was Officer's Choice. Then it became McDowell's. Then I don't know if it's Imperial Blue now this year or not, but
it's always an Indian brand, is it? Always an Indian brand.
Always. And usually it's a brand that's done, 35 million cases, 36 million cases, which is ridiculous, right? And how does that change year on year? Is a 5 rupee cut. If McDowell's cuts their price by 5 rupees, next year they are the largest selling whiskey in the world, right? So it's a mind-boggling space, and again, the more I say about it, the more we'll kind of delve into it, and it'll just spiral out of everything. What's important to know is gin is 1%, and in that less than 1%, but even in that 1%, the bulk of everything is blue ribboned. It is Blue Moon, which are mass-produced cold compounded gins, effectively lots of ethyl alcohol with flavoring added to it, right? So not the best thing to be basing a full gin industry on, which is kind of what we wanted to do, but I'm going to save that for the second part. What else about the Indian spirits space? It's a dark industry, no ads allowed, right? Of course, you all know that it's looked at as a taboo. Right, you can't just walk in and have a glass of whiskey with your mother or your grandmother, right? You'll be thrown out of the house for the most part. So there's a taboo around it. There's this whole misconception around it, and to be fair, we've also kind of played into the hands because we keep hearing about alcohol abuse and everything, and that's the one thing I would say is when you drink, don't drive. Don't drink, I know you guys are in college, but don't drink too much, right? That's the one thing I will say. It is dominated by large players. When I say large players, I'm saying Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Bacardi. These are massive conglomerates. When I say conglomerates, they are brand conglomerates. Bacardi owns Bombay Sapphire. They also own Grey Goose. They also own Bacardi. Which not a lot of people know. Diageo owns Smirnoff. They also own Guinness beer. They also own Johnny Walker, right? Not a lot of people know. These are massive companies with big budgets, right? So there is really no space for a small player to come in and kind of stake their claim. Even the guys that are in India, so your Radico Khaitans, etc. They're huge players, and they've been making their money for years and years on country liquor, right? It's only now that they've kind of started progressing into, the premium space. Paul John, if you've heard of Paul John whiskey, or if you've heard of Amrut single malt Scotch whiskey, these are flagships that we've heard of, but still, again, 99% of the business is country liquor. It is, the absolute low end of the rung. Right, they're enjoying the kind of celebration around the top end, but really their business is really stemming from the bottom of the pyramid. That's a great book, incidentally, by the way, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. But that's a separate point. Focus has been on value brands. There is no advertising involved, and the funny part is the other side of it is while at one end, we're kind of like sidelined, and by we, I mean the entire industry is kind of sidelined by the country to say, no, we can't talk about this. We can't talk about alcohol. At the other end, there's this huge dependency on alcohol, not from a personal standpoint, but dependency from a revenue perspective. Most states, if not, the top contribution, or, generally the second or third largest contributor to the kitty of each state's, coffers, comes from taxes on alcohol, right? Which is one of the top reasons why when GST was implied and said, okay, all the taxes are now going to be spread out, each and every state said, sorry, take everything else, don't take alcohol, don't take petroleum, right? These two give us too much money for us to just, give it to you guys sitting in Delhi. So, we're stuck in this conundrum where when we buy a bottle from a bottle supplier, we pay GST. When we sell alcohol, when we sell our bottle to, to the end consumer, we get VAT and GST. So it's, anyway, we're kind of stuck in the middle, which is fine. Like I told your professor, I can't call him Raman uncle in front of you guys, but like I told your professor, if I start complaining about the alcobev industry, the wine and spirits industry, we'll be here for another 3 hours and I'll still not be done. So I'm going to stop there. That is the basic overview. That's the lay of the land when it comes to the spirit industry. And this is the space that we endeavored to enter in 2014-15 when we first thought about it. I'll stop there. Do we have questions? Only up till there. Okay. All right. Trisha, I saw first. Okay, whoever.
Yeah, Trisha, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. That's a very good overview. Thank you so much, Anand. I just, everything that you spoke about sound like reasons why an entrepreneur or someone who's kind of risk averse and just wants to like maximize their profits, etc., would not enter, right? You're saying that it's a very small market. There's a lot of taboo around it. And there's just so many reasons as to why you shouldn't kind of go into it, right? It was too risky back then. So I guess all I want to understand is like what was going on in your head, and like if you have like a co-founder, because yeah, I just hear reasons as to why it's such a risky market. So what were you thinking about? What were you trying to achieve, and how did you actually market it? Like I've always wondered. Like I understand it's a lot of word of mouth, but with something like this, which is already so less well known, how did you go about it?
I think great question. I mean, honestly, if I'd known how hard it was going to be, I may not have done it. I think I also underestimated how hard it was going to be. I knew, I'd been in the industry already for 6-7 years at that point. And I knew it was going to be difficult, but I'd always kind of seen it from the marketing lens. I'd always been on the marketing side of things. So when we got into it, actually the idea was we'll give the production to someone else. They will run it. We'll run the brand. Right, we'll be the face of the brand, and that's really our expertise and everything. And because at that time we were running a bar, but again, that's part of the next step. It's tough. It's been tough. How have we run it? I'm also honestly surprised by the fact that we're still here. We're still swimming against the current. I think more surprised than how I'm now. I was surprised in 2017 when, after 2 years, of running around, kind of trying to put everything together, when we launched in September of 2017, somehow we were still the first ones there, right? The entire time we were kind of going and we were kind of planning and putting everything in place. We knew that someone else was going to come in and that someone else was going to be the first, Indian craft gin. Because there are massive players in India. There is no way in hell that, 3 of us had cracked the, Da Vinci Code. We really thought that, someone else was going to beat us to it. And when someone didn't beat us to it, and when we became the first Indian craft gin, that wasn't a point of celebration. That was a point of bigger worry for us to be like, we must have missed something, right? If we are the first ones here, clearly we are set up to fail because there's something that we've missed. There's something we didn't think about. And all these big guys have obviously been thinking about this, and they've They've thought through this, they've done their market research, and they've realized that it's not a viable place to be in. So we've just, we've leaped, but we're 100% going to fail. I think that was our conclusion in 2017 September. I think we celebrated for an hour or so, and then we're like, wait, what's happening? So again, I'll come to your points, to your other points, I think, in the discussion.
Anand, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. In
Please.
the questions, I heard things that I know you're going to cover later.
Sure.
So what you're going to cover later, I think it's perfectly acceptable to say this aspect I'll cover later.
That's right.
Because I still want you to be able to maintain your flow, because there is a logic that we worked out of what comes after what. But if things that are outside of what you intend to cover, yes, please go ahead and do that. And folks, the question answer session that Anand set out was to do with questions linked to the segment that he covered, rather than the generic. We will give you enough time for generic Q&A on all aspects that he's covered at the, somewhere middle or near the end of his talk. So just let's try to maximize the time we have with him. There's a lot of gyan, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of learning that we have to do with him, and I just don't want us to be shortchanged on that time. Sorry, Anand, I interrupted. Back to you.
No, that's fine. Happy to take another question.
So my question was more about how does licensing exactly work in the liquor industry, and does that sort of create inherently high barriers to entry for any new player trying to sort of enter the market? So how do you go about the whole licensing thing? Like, is that a difficult process?
That's a solid question. Thanks, Arnav. I saw actually a couple of hands go down. So potentially that was a question that a lot of people had. It's terribly complex. There's a lot of red tape.
Sorry. I messed up with that question, Anand. Sorry, but I wanted to maximize the time. But go ahead, please.
Okay. All right. So yes, there's a lot of red tape. Licensing is a massive issue. So every state in India operates as its own country, right? They all have their own excise law. They all have their own excise policy that changes every year. So for us, first we need to have a license to be able to produce, to be able to bottle, to be able to use each and every one of our tanks. Each one of our tanks has a separate license. It's quite mind-boggling. Let's say Delhi, right? Now you guys are closest to Delhi. Now Delhi, every time we bring in, a bottle or a case or 500 cases, we need to, get permits from Delhi for those particular bottles. Delhi will give us barcodes. We will apply those barcodes on each bottle. And that is unique to Delhi. In fact, there is a printer that we have here which prints out those barcodes that only go on the Delhi bottles. That printer cannot handle anything else, right? So we had to invest in that printer in 2017 when we were struggling to put together money, and that printer itself cost us 3 lakh rupees. Up till now, every year we had to pay Delhi government 12 lakh rupees to be able to, and this is not under the table, nothing. This is 12 lakh rupees to register to be able to sell in Delhi for that 1 year, right? Which is the same reason. Now we have 2 brands, Greater Gin and Hapusa. I've not been able to send in Hapusa till date because it's just been so expensive, and to be able to recover that, I could not, make sense of that. So Greater Gin is the one that's always been coming to Delhi. Now Maharashtra is totally different. Maharashtra is, I need to pay 8 lakh rupees a year, and then be able to send to Maharashtra any of my brands. Karnataka is totally different. It's run by the government. So I sell to the government. So knowing the intricacies of each state just takes so long. It takes so long to understand how to best operate, what goes into it. Each label has to be registered separately, and each state says, no, on this label, you need to say X thing, So in Delhi, for example, we have to say drinking liquor is injurious to health in 4 different languages, in Urdu, in Punjabi, in English, and Hindi, right? That's not a mandate that's there for anyone else. So every state has its own little, thing that we have to plug in, and it's really, really, really tough. And is it a barrier to entry? Yes. So much so that, in my previous job, I was working with this company called Rémy Cointreau, best known for Rémy Martin, the cognac, etc. And we were trying to get off the ground. In fact, they were, this is before I joined them. They were trying to get off the ground a joint venture, a partnership with Sula, where they said, we'll make a brandy called Janus. Sula knows winemaking, we know distilling. So we'll do that, we'll put that together. They invested many crores, I think upwards of 50 or 60 crores and everything. And they had a pot still like this in Baramati, which is in Maharashtra. They brought on a distiller from France who was based here for 3 years. And the poor guy, I felt really bad for him because, the entire time they were just waiting on one permission to be able to bottle. And that one permission, for whatever reason, just did not come through. For that reason, the entire company in India packed up. Rémy Cointreau in India packed up. And for me, who had just joined the company, 6 months later being told, sorry, you don't have a job. It's like, why? And it was because of the intricacies and complexities of being able to get one permit. So yeah, it's tough, right? And for us to be able to think that we'll be able to take it on ourselves was foolhardy at the very least. But I'm glad that we crossed those barriers, and we're now, we do count each and every state like it's a trophy on our showcase. So currently we're in 11 states. So each state that we've entered has been a struggle. But that struggle is getting easier now because now we can afford people, who know what they're doing, as opposed to just kind of walking into the space ourselves and saying, all right, let's see what needs to be done. Should we take one more question?
Yeah, Rohan.
Professor, do we have time for that? Yeah.
Can I go?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, Anand. So my question was regarding the terms of trade and distribution that, small up and coming brands follow in the alcohol industry. So what the norm for these sort of, up and coming brands in consumable goods market is that they sort of build a brand identity online. And more often than not, they sort of move to D2C because shelf space in the last mile retail is very hard to get with the sort of legacy brands that operate in India. And of course, that D2C route is not available to you guys because you're in the alcohol industry. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that distribution and last mile is heavily governed by these long-standing relationships that distributors have with legacy brands and old business houses in India particularly. So when you're competing with these sort of large, something like an Imperial Blue, something Indian brands that are selling 35 million cases a year, large global brands like Diageo, how exactly do you negotiate the terms of trade with your last mile and your distributors? And how exactly does a up and coming brand in alcohol negotiate shelf space with the last mile sort of retailers and wholesalers?
Also, Anand,
That's a great question, man.
I had a
yeah, please.
question. Can I just add to Rohan's question? I was
Yeah,
thinking, since you talked about the legacy brands, right? And legacy brands have kind of mostly advertised through surrogacy advertisements on television. And now that Rohan also spoke about how brands are coming in DTC, where they're following sort of this new model of reaching out to consumers. And you also spoke about how advertisements aren't allowed. So I was wondering, in this regulation environment, how do you sort of build your brand online? Are you able to use surrogacy advertisements in the way that legacy brands are using? So maybe if you could also shed light on that part. Thank you.
I think that's great. I think those questions are fantastic. Legacy brands have been more than a pain in our side. In fact, I think we've been the pain in their side. That whole last mile bit, honestly, is something that I've heard a lot about. Tech players, etc., struggle with that. Retail players struggle with that, and brands like ready to eat stuff struggle with that as well. For us, there are networks that exist, and we have to learn to be a part of that network. So we always work with specialists in each state. So for example, we will go to Maharashtra and find the distributor that we think is best suited for our purpose. For Maharashtra, that purpose we thought was to build our presence in bars. So we went to a distributor who's got a great reach within bars. For Goa, we wanted someone who had a better presence in retail. So we went to someone who had a better presence in retail. So day one with him, he was able to position us in 130 different retail stores, which was fantastic for us, right? Because that's when we just launched. So having said that, I think when we, and I'll limit this answer to more of the industry, how the industry works is that typically a Pernod Ricard or a Diageo or one of these bigger guys would walk into a bar and be like, here, I'm going to pay you 20 lakhs a year and you will only pour my brands. You will only pour my vodka, my whiskey, my rum and all of that, right? Diageo will kind of go in and do that as well. And they will say, listen, I will give you a nice signage and I will do this for you. I will do that for you. And you will only pour my brands. Where we were able to kind of squeak in through that was to say, hey, you know us. We're small. We're no threat to these big guys. And none of the big guys in any case have a gin in the pouring category. Right. So I'll leave it at that because there is a bit I want to talk about the price gap and the story gap and everything. So I'm not gonna talk more about that, but I'm gonna come back to that. I think that's a very serious point. And if I don't address that, remind me right after the next segment. I will talk a little bit more about that. But thank you. Yeah. Okay. Shall we? Sorry. Sohina, you have one other question, right?
Yeah, so I was just wondering about when you said that, like there's so much regulation, especially in terms of marketing, you're just not allowed to advertise directly, especially. I was wondering if you think that there's hope for change in that sphere, because I'm particularly thinking of this one event 2 years ago. It was a cocktail festival in Delhi. And I'd never seen like alcohol being marketed so openly in India ever before. And it was beautiful. It was a really nice event. And I remember your gin was on tap at that event. I thought that was really, really cool. So I was just thinking of that event, and it just made me think, like, do you think there's potential for at least like the marketing regulation to kind of ease up a bit in the future, and that would really, help more brands to be able to enter the industry and less barriers?
See, all of the easing that happens, and thank you, Zina, for that. All of the easing that has happened that we've been able to take advantage of still falls into a gray area. No one has defined that you can carry out events. No one has defined that you can have a Instagram page even, right? Technically, there is a ban on advertising, alcohol. Now, does that extend to Instagram, Facebook, and all? No one knows, right? And that's why. That's why we're just going for it, and no one has really questioned us on it either. And we're kind of looking at each other and saying, "Hey, Diageo is doing it, Bacardi is doing it. We'll also do it, right?" There's absolutely no regulation which says that we're allowed to do it, because no one has said we're not allowed to specifically do this in the online space. We're still doing it. So I think at our stage, at our level, at our size. We take advantage of every little opportunity that we can, every little loophole that we see, we just dive right in, full, with all our energy and all our force, we just dive right in. Because if not, there's no way that we're going to be able to compete with the bigger guys.
By the way, you guys should look at the Instagram page of Hapusa and Greater. It has some great content. So. But Anand, I'm very impressed with the class's interest in the product that you're talking about. And I can see a lot of heads nod for all the brands that you're mentioning. And I have to say at this point of time, I know this is being recorded, but you guys have a great product. And I think that product is something which all of us have, many of us have actually experienced, and would love to see more of it in Delhi. For sure. Okay, should we move on to the next segment?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Raman,
you can.
Go ahead, Anand.
Okay. So the next segment is more about our journey. How did we get here? And to kind of talk about that, it does need to be a little bit about my journey as well, because I think as the question was asked initially, I had no intention of making gin. In fact, during my experiences, certain experiences in college, I never thought I would drink gin ever again. And here we are. But yeah, I mean, I went to school in Delhi, Springdale School, left from there, and I thought I really wanted to get into finance. I loved, understanding more about the stock market, and I thought, wow, this is really what I want to get into. I chose a school that I thought had a great investment banking program, where I thought, okay, it'll get me into New York and see what happens. The school was called Babson College. I don't know if you've heard of it. At that point, honestly, I'd never heard of it. And everyone I spoke to, I see a couple of heads nodding, but everyone I spoke to, I had to say, listen, it's in Boston or it's near Boston, but not Boston University, not all of those. It turned out to be the #1 entrepreneurship school in the world. And I seriously think somewhere along the line, as much as I tried to shake it, it just kind of stuck with me. It was a bug that kind of bit me there itself. But I spent the first year learning, and just applying myself to finance and taking all the finance classes and saying, all right, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I'm going to be doing. And I was very convinced until we started a business in college as part of our curriculum, and I became the CFO for that. And I was like, wow, this is great. Only to realize that it kind of like overtook my life. Like, my life became about numbers and everything. And I was like, maybe I don't want this finally. So ended up just kind of thinking about what else should I be doing? What else can I potentially be doing? And I spent most of the second year of college trying to think that, okay, if not finance, what then? And at that point, one of my professors did a case study with me on the wine industry. I said, wow, that's interesting. It's you take the label off this thing and it's worthless. And you put one label or another label or a third label on it, and it totally changes value, totally changes story. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Ended up just getting into the wine industry and getting kind of enamored by the wine industry there. Spent 6 months, in New Zealand doing a thesis on the wine industry, came back to college, and I was like, wow, this is great. I sent, at the time that I was graduating, I'm not joking, 120 plus emails with my resume attached to them, pleading and begging people to give me a job in the wine industry, and not a single person bit on that. So I ended up somehow bagging a job back in India at Deloitte Consulting, where I was about 10 meters away from your professor's lovely wife. She happened to be one of the partners in there. Sorry, one second. Thank you. Okay, so I was at Deloitte, and I came back from the first day of work saying, I can't do this. Not something I want to be doing, because, consultancy is great. I mean, my dad had kind of, drilled this in me that, listen, use it as a stepping stone, figure out what else you want to do. I was like, I already know what I want to do, right? So I already know I want to get into the F&B space. I want to be at that time, I thought maybe I want to be working at a vineyard, right? I never thought I wanted to be in spirits. So somehow did lots and lots and lots of, interviews, spoke to every Tom, Dick, and Harry I met. And one of them turned out and said, hey, I know someone who knows someone who's, at this company called William Grant's, and, they make whiskey. I said, not what I want to do, but maybe anyway, long story short, spoke to them, got into that space. So in total, I spent about a year at Deloitte, which was a massive learning, because I worked in a car parts manufacturing facility. I worked in a Lakhani shoes, right? So I did, streamlining of chappal making processes as well, which, it is what it is. And that was great. But I ended up at William Grant & Sons, learned a lot about the industry, mainly working with single malts, mainly working with a gin called Hendrix, which at that point no one wanted to touch. Because, gin was not cool at that time, right? This is 2010. Gin was seen as a, women's drink. It was seen as, if you are a, pensioner, so 60 plus, sitting in Gymkhana on an afternoon, you could have a gin and tonic, and that was it, right? After 3.5 years, I moved away from that, went back to discover my roots in wine, went to Burgundy, did my master's of science in wine and spirits, got offered a job, did not have the visa, came back, and started working with Rémy Cointreau, where, like I told you, about 8-9 months in, I got laid off, right? The entire company shut down. So it really had been a little bit all over the place. And then finally, one of my friends says, hey, I want to start a wine bar. You know a thing or two about wine. You've been to Burgundy. Do you want to help? I said, yeah, great. Sounds good. I do want to get back into wine. So great. And that's where we started. He started this place called Perch Wine Coffee Bar. If you've heard of it in Delhi, in Khan Market, in Vasant Vihar. And again, this was me diving back into wine, right? And I was like, wow, great. This finally my life, life goal kind of, I'm being able to kind of, check off the list. But within the first few, within the first few days and maybe the first week itself, we realized there was something funny happening. We were on the floor, which meant like, we'd be going to the tables ourselves saying, hey, how are you? Thank you for coming. What can I get for you? And that was what I did, by the way, for 2 years. I waited tables while also handling social media and stuff, which was great. But in those conversations, within the first week itself, we realized, and we would have these kind of like 2 a.m. Chats, after everyone had left. And we were like, listen, what's happening? Why are so many people coming in and asking for gin? I thought gin was not cool. It's really strange how this is happening. People are coming in. Not only are they asking for like Hendrix, right? And I would have died if someone in 2010 would have said, get me a Hendrix tonic with cucumber slices, right? It was something we were trying to drill into each bartender to be like, listen, when you serve a gin and tonic with Hendrix, give it with a cucumber slice. No one would listen. And there was always a lemon that would show up. And the fact that here was consumers coming in and saying, hey, can I get a gin and tonic with Hendrix and a couple of slices of cucumber? We're like, wow, how has this happened? What has changed, right? I mean, in 2011, 2012, no one wanted to look at gin. Now we're sitting in 2015, like 3 years later, and suddenly everyone's talking about gin. Everyone's coming and trying the latest gin cocktail or whatever else, right? So we thought about it, and somehow it kind of like, the more and more we thought about it, we spoke to others as well to say, is it just happening in Khan Market? Is it just happening in Perch? And we spoke to our some of the other bar managers, some of the other bar owners, and they said, no, actually, it's funny. We've also noticed the same thing. I said, okay. Said, at that point, I think one of us said, someone should launch a gin. Someone should launch a gin in India. Why? Because everything else was kind of a category which was filled up, right? Whiskey, you had whiskeys at every price range. Vodkas, you had vodkas at most price ranges. Gin was the one kind of anomaly where you had a 200 rupee gin, you had a 250 rupee gin, you had a 100 rupee gin. And then beyond that, you had a 1,700 rupee gin. So you didn't have a attainable, affordable, interesting gin, where the rest of the world was going kind of gin crazy, right? You had all these kind of small batch gins, all these handcrafted gins kind of coming about. Gin was the one kind of, India was kind of ignored, from that perspective. So we said, someone should make a gin, right? Someone who can make a gin and bring it in at about this 1,000 rupee range, which is, kind of like the Goldilocks moment. There's a price gap, there's a story gap. India is the birthplace of the gin and tonic, by the way. I don't know if most of you know it, but gin and tonic was invented in India, not by us, by the British, but we'll take credit for it. How does it matter? So how is it that not a single gin has come from India? Right? If you look at any can of tonic water, and I used to think this was only because these were cans which were made in India, that they had Indian tonic water written on them. But you go anywhere in the world, you pick up a bottle of tonic water or a can of tonic water, it'll say Indian tonic water, because tonic water itself was invented in India by the British as a cure for malaria, right? So there was a story gap, there was a price gap, and this price gap itself was substantial because when you walk into a bar, there is such a thing called a pouring brand, where if I by default say, listen, give me a rum and coke, they will by default pour me a Bacardi. Or if I say a whiskey and soda, they will by default pour me whatever is their pouring brand. So they will pour me a Teachers or a Black and White or a Black Dog, whatever it is. The big difference between a pouring brand and any other brand on their menu is the pouring brand will sell, let's say, 10 cases in a month. The rest combined will sell about 1 case in a month. So to be a pouring brand is huge from a volume perspective. And most of those pouring brands would be in that MRP range of about 800 to 1,200 rupees. So Teachers, Smirnoff, Bacardi, all of these were in that range. And in gin, you had nothing. So as a bar, if I wanted a pour, of course, you had to have a pouring brand. So I had to make a choice. So I could either, make a lot of money, but choose a terrible brand like Blue Ribbon, or I could eat into my own margin, but choose a brand that at least I was confident of serving. So I would choose like a Gordon's or a Tanqueray and pay $1,700 for the bottle, right? There was no Goldilocks, right? That Goldilocks moment wasn't there, right? It wasn't, too hot, too cold. It was just right. And that's where we found a gap, that I don't know if you've heard of the blue ocean strategy, but that for us was the blue ocean, right? Where we said there's no one else competing. So we positioned greater than right in there, where we said this could be the bartender's friend. It could be the entry level point for most of, these people who are coming in asking for gin, and they have to spend, like Hendrix money or Bombay Sapphire kind of money to be able to get a decent gin. Imagine how many more people are out there who would be happy to have a gin that is their regular everyday gin, but doesn't have to be a Blue Ribbon. It can be a proper copper pot distilled gin, not a, not ethyl alcohol with flavoring in it. So that's the kind of gap that we saw for greater than, and I think we just got lucky. Because we were at the right place at the right time, just before the industry really exploded in India. And I think just when the interest in gin was taking off. So that really became our starting point, where we said, okay, let's go out and do it. And then when we said, okay, yeah, we have this concept in our mind clear, and we said, okay, clearly someone will make it for us. We went out and started speaking to people. We spoke to large, producers, distillers, and we said, listen, will you make a craft gin for us? And they said, sorry, what do you mean craft? We said, we mean about a couple of thousand cases a year. They're like, sorry, we do a couple of thousand cases an hour here. We can't do a couple of thousand cases a year. What's wrong with you? So we got kicked out of a lot of offices. Laughed out of a few of them as well. I said, listen, this is never going to work. What are you doing? Why are you wasting our time? Why are you wasting your time? And a lot of people ask, why did we start in Goa? Because we're in Goa now. We said, listen, we had no ambition of being near beaches or anything. It was just we finally found someone who would listen to us and who finally said, hey, listen, I have a corner in my factory. I'll give that to you. Right. And that's why we ended up in Goa, because this was really the last place we came to. It's amazing because even our distributor at that point, the person we met at that point said, hey, I've been distributing Diageo for the last 15 years, at best, you guys will sell 15, 20 cases a month, right? Within 2 months, we were averaging with him 300 cases a month in Goa, in a place we never thought would become, a gin drinking space, because, people would come to Goa and drink beer and drink, anything other than gin. Feni, if that. But yeah, it's been fun because 5 years later, we're making 2 gins with limited editions and light still going for whatever reason. But 5 years later, we're making Greater Than, we're making Hapusa. Hapusa also was an interesting one. I wish I had more time to get into it, but it became this great story for us to tell, where we said, listen, there's juniper that grows in India that no one ever has used in the world to make gin with. So let's us use it and let's us kind of own that story. I know, by the way, what is juniper called in Sanskrit? It's called Hapusa. So I said, oh, great. We'll call the gin that itself. So it's been really fun. And if I look back at it, getting laid off was one of the best things that happened to me, because without that, and it was an idea that we always thought about, why is there no gin in this price gap? But I was very happy being in that job, because it was keeping me close to wine and spirits. It was giving me a salary. There was talk that if I did well, they'd transfer me to Singapore or one of their other international offices. I was very happy, very content. That entrepreneurial virus in me hadn't been activated as yet, but I think at some point you have to be thrown into the fire to be like, okay, fine, let's do something real here. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm keen to talk about prototyping, but we'll pause there, and if you guys have questions, happy to answer them. Okay. I saw Nitin and Rachita first, so whichever one of you wants to go for it, please.
Yep, thank you. So, I mean, you yourself are like, okay, I just got laid off from a job in this industry. Now, I mean, just means I cannot comprehend that you are getting laid off in that industry because of a licensing issue or whatever. And the same issue you are going to face. Means, how do you make that decision that I'm up for it?
I made the decision when I thought I wouldn't have to face it. I made the decision when I thought someone else will make the gin for us, and I'll just be the face of the brand. It wasn't until we realized that no one was willing to make the gin, no one was willing to take that risk for us, that we said, okay, I guess we have to do this ourselves, which is when we went and raised the money. I think this was the time that I was talking to your professor, but that's when we raised the money to buy a copper pot still. And then we said, okay, now we'll hire a distiller. And then we realized there was no distiller qualified to run a pot still. So we said, okay, screw it, I'll do it. That's how a commerce student became a distiller. Yeah, honestly, it's been, you face one obstacle, you don't face 100 obstacles together. You face one obstacle and you get over that obstacle, then you get to the next obstacle. It's that, it's a funny way how Hollywood kind of pitches, 100 villains against one hero of yours, right? Why don't all 100 of them hit the guy together and, get done with it? No, one by one, they come in line and that's how it happens. So that's pretty much how it happened. Rachita.
Yeah. Hi, Anand. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. I'm extremely interested in the alcobev space, so this is extremely exciting for me. And I don't think it'd be far-fetched for me to attribute the gin revolution sort of happening in the country to now somewhere as the starting point, because you guys were sort of you had the first mover advantage or disadvantage, as you would say. And there is a revolution that's happening because every second person now wants to drink gin. And in fact, we were just planning like a family wedding, and there's a gin only bar with only Indian handcrafted small batch gins. So I just wanted to wonder, as a brand, when you said that the market share didn't exist, right? So when you're working on marketing or creating a brand, how do you create an audience, not just for your product, but you're changing the culture itself, right? Like you're creating something that doesn't exist from nothing. And also, are you worried ever in the long term that this may just be a fad? So that's my first question. And secondly, so this is specific to Hapusa and Greater Than. They're both very different in terms of taste, market, price point, all of that. So was there any like market cannibalization, or what was like the intention of getting two products at different price points in the market together? Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, both great questions. I'll try and answer both. If I forget one, because I have like a goldfish's memory, just remind me. I'll come back to it. But effectively, when we got into this, what was the market planning that we did? It was the best that I could do. It was to the best of my knowledge, right? It was my learning from Rémy, and it was my learning from William Grant's, and it was also my learning from what was happening at Perch. So it was throwing darts into the dark, right? Not knowing what was landing, what was happening. We put together a business plan, the business plan that I sent to your professor, which was, best guess. It was, and that I've realized is how most people operate in a space that is unexplored, right? How can you, what are the, we constantly were asked at that point, so can you point at someone who's kind of done this before? And, is there a precedent for it? No, we're setting the precedent, right? So you really are hoping that people trust what you're doing and support you, as opposed to fall for it. You hope that they support it and we're able to really build something together. Why we chose two things, why we chose two brands instead of one, is because we had two very different things that we wanted to achieve. One was to kind of create this Goldilocks brand, to create this kind of gateway product that we thought would be the gateway to the industry, which was the right, if you've ever talked about customer value proposition, we wanted to make a better product than what was out there at a better price, right? So we were trying to do it all really with Greater Than, which is really where the name also comes from. It's greater than any other gin, right? So we were really trying to create a better product in terms of how it's made and position it at a much better price, much more affordable price. Because effectively it's made in the same exact way that your Tanqueray and your Gordon's, etc., and your Bombay Sapphire is made, but it's at half the price, right? With Hapusa, we were trying to tell a story. With Hapusa, we were trying to talk about the fact that, hey, gin is the one spirit that uses botanicals. And by the way, we happen to be sitting in, the botanical capital of the world, the spice capital of the world. So why is it that a Bombay Sapphire can use, our story while never having had anything to do with India? None of the botanicals come from India, right? It's sitting in the UK. And I have a lot of love for Bombay Sapphire because of many reasons, but why are they owning that story? Why is Colombo gin even, right? Colombo gin is made in Spain, but it's called Colombo gin because the owner, the guy who invested in it, is from Sri Lanka. Sikkim gin, not made in India. Jodhpur gin, not made in India. So we really wanted to own that story, right? Without making it a cliche, right? So we stayed away from elephants and snake charmers. We said, we'll talk about modern India. And it's possible to talk about modern India. It's possible to talk about our life through a gin rather than have to talk about colonial stories, etc. So these were two very different things we were trying to do. And even till date, I'll say there's not a single bottle that's been kind of cannibalized here and there. I think if someone walks into a store and they want to buy a Greater Than, they'll go for a Greater Than. I cannot switch them from a Greater Than to a Hapusa. Right? Two very different price points. Hapusa is at 3,000 rupees, Greater Than is at 1,000 rupees. Two different stories, two different flavor profiles. If you want to do cocktails, you do Greater Than. If you want to do a gin by itself, you do Hapusa. So from that space, I feel we're quite safe. And yes, it was a question that was asked to me right in the beginning as well when we were just launching and neither had been launched, to say, why are you taking on two things? We said, we believe in both things. That's why we're taking on both things. If that answers. Varnit, do you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Anand. It was really nice hearing your story. So my question was, in future, where do you see your brand going? Like, do you want to expand into the complements of a gin, that is tonic water or soda water? Or do you see yourself expanding into different types of alcohol like whiskey or beer or something?
I think having overcome the hurdles that we have, getting into, and frankly, we had the same thought that, oh, we're doing gin, we should now do tonic, right? But the route to market is totally different for the two. So I would have had to reconstruct another route to market for tonic. So I said, listen, let's identify what we're good at. We're good at making small batch spirits. Currently, that small batch spirits is limited to gin. So we are sticking to gin. But, and there was another question before, do I think gin might be a fad? I don't know. I'm going on the fact that, hey, it's going strong everywhere else in the world. And if it has to, hit the roof here or whatever, if it has to go, fall off a cliff here, it will fall off a cliff first in the UK. So I will have a 2-year, 3-year warning to say that it's all going to go kaput, right? Because the UK is where we get our consumer trends from. It's not the US, it's not Singapore, it's not anywhere else. Somehow, in all our market research, what we found is the UK is giving us is defining our consumption pattern. So, yeah, I mean, where do I see ourselves? I definitely see ourselves being a craft spirits player. Will we come out with a whiskey next? Maybe I know, maybe I don't. I definitely can't say it.
Thank you.
Shivansh, you have a question? Is it the same question you had for me before?
No, so I have actually a compound of questions. So first thing was that when you started off, you started on the basis that because nobody else is going to make it for us, we'll make it. But at that point of time, as you said, you had no idea it would grow so much as to sell 300 crates. So I want to ask, what was the aim when you and 2 of your friends started to decide this business? Was it only that we know there's a huge niche, at least in car market in Delhi and around some bars there, we'll start selling to them and this is good enough business for us? Or did you want to make this big business out of it? I am not so sure about the size of the business right now, but still. And just to further that question, when you take a business to investors only earn money if another person invests at a better price. So at that point in time, if you're not trying to build a very high scalable business or a very big business, why would any investor want to put money into you? And what are questions they would ask you? That this is a very niche brand and it evidently looks like a niche brand. So why would an investor end up investing in you if they can't essentially grow it at a huge pace?
That's amazing. I'm surprised at the insight that you have, because this is something that I also understood probably about 2 years ago, that investors will only make money if someone else comes in and is willing to pay more for it and everything. Yeah, I agree. So clearly you're in the right hands, because you already understand this and you'll be prepared when you're starting your own business yourself. So to answer your question, did we have great hopes? Yeah, I think we did. I think from day one we realized that for it to really be successful, it'll have to be scalable. And that scale is something that people don't talk about enough. And we had seen this happen. We'd seen this happen already with Bira. Right now, Bira was one that I looked up to, because it was like, wow, here's someone who's come in, created a craft beer in a country which had no craft beer. But when you scraped a little bit deeper, you realize it was not made in India; it was made in Belgium. And the bottle said "imagined in India." So you're like, what's happening here? So what they did was they wanted to do a product test. They wanted to do a test market, and they said, okay, we'll get this beer from outside and we'll underprice it. So we'll lose money on every bottle that we're selling. But if it works, then we'll set up a facility here in India, which is the part that they struggled with. This linking of that same flavor profile will happen here. So we really, when we set out the business plan, we said, okay, we need to be prepared for success. If it happens or not, doesn't matter, right? But we need to prepare ourselves for success, which means when we're investing in machinery, we need to invest in something that will take us there. So we invested in a pot still, actually against my instinct, because my instinct was, oh, we only need this much, we'll only get this much, right? But one of our key advisors at that time said, no, what is the difference between a 300 liter pot still and a 1,000 liter pot still? from a price point of view, it's not a linear thing. In fact, the bigger you get, actually, the more per liter efficiency you will get. So said, okay, we'll invest in 1,000-liter pot still, thinking I'm never going to need this. And now I'm running it at about 70-80% capacity. Right. Right now, also there are botanicals in there waiting to be distilled at night. So prepare when you again, and I don't mean for this to be one-liners that you guys will hold on to, but at least for us, what was important was this whole idea of preparing for success, because Bira was not prepared for success. They got this massive demand, and suddenly they realized we can't fulfill it. So massive demand, no supply. Right? When we got massive demand, at least we were able to supply. Yes, there are other things that tripped us up, like policies and label registrations and stuff like that. But this was not a bottleneck. Our production facility was not a bottleneck. The bottlenecks were more at at the end of the excise and red tape and all of that. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up on this. So,
Sure.
I get it how you already were interested in this industry. This is only because you mentioned at the start of this segment. You already had interest in the alco bev industry, and you actually particularly wanted to get into wine, but you ended up doing consulting because you had no other option. For a person who's like, I know I don't want to do for a job for a fact, but they don't know what industry they want to get into. Do you think we should force our way to learn about different industries and like see which one we like, or we just let the industry come to us?
We read Harry Potter. The wand chooses you.
I'm reading.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the wand chooses you. Honestly, I think I'm still very, I did not enjoy it, but I'm still very glad for that experience I got at Deloitte, because it taught me quite a few lessons that I didn't even realize I was learning. Right? It's one of those things when you're sitting in class in 11th standard learning quadratic equations and thinking, where am I ever going to apply this? You never know where you're going to apply it. Right. And I've applied it now, in distilling. And it's one of those things that you're like, I never thought this was going to come to use. So I think it's one of those things that, my dad has always told me is, whatever you're doing, do it well. There's truth in that, because whatever you're doing is going to prepare you for what you're going to be doing next. Even if you don't know what you're going to be doing next, it's going to be, one way or another, it's going to prepare you for that. When I was working at William Grant's, I wasn't thinking that I'm going to learn about gin and someday I'm going to, start making a gin brand. Those learnings helped me in a way that I would never have known at that point. Insight about a category that I thought was dead, became the base level for analysis, which later I would say, hey, it used to be base level. Now it's this. There must be something here. So yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I sound like, I sound like my father when I say this, but whatever you do well. I think there's a lot of truth to that. We don't have that 2020 vision to be able to look 5 years, 10 years into the future and say, if I want to be, this, then for that I need to create this path. There is no way you can do that. There's no way. If I went back in time and I tried to create that same path, I wouldn't be able to do it. Maybe I'll somehow get the license for Rémy Cointreau and there you go. I'm still a Rémy Cointreau employee, right? Or I get the visa and I'm in the UK, selling wine to people. So you're never going to be able to, chart that path out. But the only thing is, if there is an opportunity that's given to you and you think you like it now, take it, right? And make the most of it. Sorry, that's it. I've heard that advice as well, but yeah. Swarna, you wanna ask something?
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, you were telling us about how expensive the cost of licensing and getting permits and everything is. Obviously, manufacturing and distribution must have been another very huge cost. So where did you guys get the capital in the initial days? Were you guys bootstrapped? Did you take a loan? Did you have investors? And if you could just talk about the finance of the whole company and where the journey is.
Sure. I did not have enough friends and family to back me up at that point in my harebrained idea. So I had to kind of go out and thankfully, the first meeting itself was with people who had invested in Perch. the wine and coffee bar that we were working at. And we were literally like spitballing this as an idea to say someone should make it. And they were like, oh, why don't you make it? We're like, oh, okay. So we got lucky because again, we were at the right place at the right time and we were talking to the right people and they said, here's 20 lakhs, go do some market research, see if it works. And we're like, wow, 20 lakhs. So we actually went out, made the best use of that, got the right people involved. Called up some of my contacts in the alcohol space and said, listen, can we actually go out and meet? Can you introduce me to a couple of distillers so I can go meet them, understand really how deep this rabbit hole goes. And it was, I gave up way too much equity at that point than I should have. But again, I was just happy that there were people who were willing to back me on this. And really, I never had that kind of business understanding and, despite going to business school, I never had that understanding of equity and how important it is to hold on to equity. But I think that's a learning I'll take into my next business as well. And it's something that, that I talk about, now as well. We got angel investors, I guess you can say, to invest in us, to take on equity at that stage on a fairly risky business. And since then, we've managed to make it look less risky in every phase. And we've since gone to high net worth individuals. We've gone out to family offices. We even have a boutique VC on our cap table now. All the time we keep getting people coming knocking on the door saying, hey, we're a big company. So strategic investors saying, hey, we're a big company, we'd like to invest. So those conversations are also always on, and it's great to kind of be able to talk about those as well. Should we take one more question and then we'll move to the next stage, the prototyping part, or I'm okay taking all three questions. Depends on how much time we have.
Very keen we do the prototyping piece, Anand. There's a lot of learning for them. So can I request Vivan, Radhika, Yashraj, hold your questions. We'll still come back to the Q&A piece.
All right.
We work very hard to craft these sessions. So I want to get the best juice. With Anand, you can't say juice. The best spirit out of him.
Juice is where it starts. Okay, so I'll quickly talk about prototyping and how we did it. Now, presumably you guys would have got one case study from the wine world, which was something that we were introduced to earlier, and I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. But we'll come to that at the end. And the other one was this great one on Nike. I don't know if that was the one that was sent out. That was the Nike one sent out. So it's not really a case study. It just happens to be.
Both of them went out, the screw top bottle and the Nike one, Anand. So
Nike, I read the book too late in my entrepreneurial life. I think if I read it earlier, I would have had less issue with my approach to the business, right? There's so many things that just kind of fell into place for us that we were like, definitely we're doing it wrong, that, we should have put more market research into it and we should have really been super thorough with it, despite how thorough we were with it. But we could have been more thorough with it. And then I read Shoe Dog, which is this book by Phil Knight, who's the, founder of Nike. And it turned out he never wanted to launch his own brand. He was very happy selling Onitsukas. Onitsuka Tigers, right? Never wanted to launch his own brand, but because Onitsuka pushed back, he said, so now we're going to have to push back. And then he said, okay, we'll launch something else. And overnight they launched something which was, and they called it Nike. It was a name he did not like. But he agreed to it because it was, they just had to register something. So he registered it. He had to register a logo. So he literally hired a college student, and for $20 or $30 or something, she gave him a logo which he did not like. But because of the timeline, he said, okay, screw it, register it. It doesn't matter. And now you look at that company, you look at that logo and you think, what a genius move, right? To simplify, to minimize, to do all of that. And you read that book and he's like, yeah, never thought it would be what it is. So didn't think too much about it, just gave it a name. Right? It was not a name I liked. It was not a name there was no name I could agree upon with my co-founder. So we just decided not to go with either of our preferences and decided to go with this other thing. And that kind of beautifully summed it up. And even in that interview, he talks about how they constantly try to learn from the consumer, but even when they have the right intention and they want to learn from the consumer, they get it wrong. They wanted to get into lifestyle shoes and they thought, okay, now we're making this step into lifestyle shoes, not realizing they were going to totally get it wrong, and that actually they should stick to running shoes or basketball shoes and further diversify in that. So I think that was a great learning for me as well, is to say that yes, put your best foot forward, but at some point, don't worry. Just if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It's going to fall into place. But for us, putting the best foot forward was focus groups. I absolutely love focus groups, right? So when we were developing the recipe, it was literally a lab still that is still here actually, but a lab still that that I had bought from Scotland. And when it first came, it broke into 50,000 pieces, and then I had to order it again. And then it was set up in our spare room at home, which later became my child's room. But at that time was a room we would go through all our laundry in. But that room was where I would do all the experiments, right? So I would distill something and be like, oh, okay, now interesting. This is a nice taste. That's a nice taste. And the first focus groups was actually me inviting a couple of, the bartender friends and saying, hey, taste this. Hey, taste that. What do you think? What do you like about this? What I realized was people didn't like cardamom as much as I did. So I had to tone down the cardamom. People liked certain flavors more than I did. So I had to be like, all right, okay, let's do this. Because in my mind, I had to get the bartender to really like it. So we did a lot of that kind of experimentation, a lot of that kind of, informal focus groups. Even with the design, even with the look of the bottle, we would regularly get people at Perch or at one of the other bars or restaurants and say, hey, come, we'll get you, we'll get you foods on us, drinks are on us, gin and tonics are on us. But we want your feedback on what you think about this. And I would stand there. So one of the other three founders is my wife, Aparajita. She's the creative head. So she would stand next to me and we would hold up two big, A2 size prints of, two labels that we liked or two bottle directions that we liked. And then people would look at it, with their gin and tonics and be like, oh, but what about this? What about that? So Hapusa initially was going to be called a Bengal dry gin, because we thought that gin and tonic originated from potentially the Bengal region or Calcutta region. But people didn't understand that. So why Bengal? And I was so convinced about Bengal. I was like, look, it sounds great. Hapusa Bengal dry gin, right? It sounds great. And people were just like, no, it doesn't work, right? What is so Bengali about it? I said, yeah, but we're using this Gondaraj line, but is that the main crux of your story? No. So why Bengal? I like it. So that's something that happens sometimes as a founder. You fall in love with your own idea, right? You love something so much that you can't see beyond that, right? And to everyone who questions you, you're like, they don't get it, right? It's so clear in my head. But after hearing so many people say Bengal dry gin does not make sense, what else can you call it? I was like, okay, you can call it India dry gin. It's very kind of all-encompassing, but I never liked that whole India dry. I say it's too, people outside India can say India, but we know India is not India. India is like so diverse. We don't eat Indian food. We eat, Punjabi food, or we eat Gujarati food, or we eat, Mallu food. We don't eat, Indian food. So that's when we decided, okay, we're going to focus in on one thing. And that one thing is going to be the juniper, because Hapusa is called juniper. And then when we tested that on people said, oh, okay, Himalayan dry gin. Interesting. Why? Because, oh, your juniper, which is the main ingredient, comes from the Himalayas. Okay. But then there was still this disconnect. Oh, but you're making it in Goa, but you're calling it Himalayan dry gin, which was the second learning, that at some point you have to, you have to listen to people, but at some point you have to also kind of close your ears and be like, all right, that's it. I'm not taking any more feedback, and you have to kind of move with it, because if you leave that channel open, you're just going to get constant feedback, unsolicited advice from everyone, which happened for a very, very long time. One of our key mentors at that time, by the way, was telling us that, listen, guys, all this is great, right? At the end of every meeting, it'd be like, guys, all this is great, but why are you making a gin? Make a beer. Look at what this Ankur Jain fellow is doing. He's, big success in beer. Make a beer. So at some point, you just have to say, listen, I'm confident in what I'm doing. I've heard what you have to say. I take that on, but here's what I'm doing, and it's going to be great. Trust me. So I think focus groups for us were amazing, right? And for me, it's another Nike story that I come back to, where again, and this is not in the book either. I was looking for it in the book, but it was a professor of mine who worked at Nike, who told us about this story in business school. He was like, when they were first trying out the air cushion, right? Nike Air. Everyone knows Nike Air. Why is it called Nike Air? Because there's a cushion of air inside the sole. He said when he was first trying out the air cushion, he literally took one of those, when you check for blood pressure, there's this ball of air in your hand, right, which you squeeze, etc. So he took that, he taped it to the bottom of shoes, of basketball shoes, and somehow kind of jigged it, and went and took a whole set of these to a local basketball team and said, hey, you guys are training, why don't you try on these shoes? And they looked at this shoe, they're like, what is this and everything, and they tried it on, laced it up, walked away into the court, played around for a little while, came back, said, I'm sorry, this doesn't work, it's terrible, what are you even thinking, it just doesn't work. So fine, they gave it to the guy, and the guy was rejected, and it's fine. Okay, he starts packing it up. They wear their own shoes. They go back to the court. 10 minutes later, one of them comes back and says, hey, actually, now that I'm in my shoes again, can I actually try that one again? That was actually really nice. And then another one comes, and finally they're all like, hey, actually, your shoe was great. So for me, what was interesting about that is, more often than not, people also don't know what they want. And it's not until you give it to them that they realize that something was missing in their life. I've been another kind of similar example. I've been a Facebook user since 2005, right? Facebook had a terrible habit. Every 2 months, 3 months, just when you got used to the entire thing, they would change something. And when they would change something, everyone would bitch and moan about it, right? Everyone would be like, how have they done this? They were so great before. Why have they done this change? So the Facebook wall, I don't know if you guys know, Facebook wall used to be a Word doc. So you would go on to someone's profile. Let's say you go on to, I don't know, Natasha's profile, right? You go onto Natasha's profile and you click on her wall, and like a little like cursor would show up there, and you could literally go and delete everything that's on her wall. And just say, hey, how's it going, Natasha, right? So it was like, and no one would know who's written it, right? And suddenly there was this thing that Facebook said, okay, now when you post on someone's wall, it'll come with your name. So now people will know who's written it. You're like, oh, that spoils it, right? That ruins the anonymity of it and everything. But it didn't, right? Facebook did not die in 2005. They are still a beast today, and in fact, they're much, much larger, and they understand what we want probably much, much more than we do. But I think that's the other bit, is when you're prototyping, when you're doing your market research and everything, it's 100% important for you to go out and speak to people and ask them what they want. Ask them what they like. Ask them what they like about your product. What do they like about your prototype, right? But it's also important to realize that they may not know what they want or what they like, right? Or the conditions may not be suited for it. So if you read the other case study that was sent across, which was on the wine industry, where's this, I think Pusey Val winery, where they were the leaders in Riesling, in white wines in Australia, right? And at this point, Australia's got a great reputation. 1970s, they've got a great reputation in in quality wine, everything is, comes with a cork, right? Wine bottles come with corks, and if you have a screw cap on your bottle, that means it's bad wine, and you couldn't even afford a cork, so why should we buy it? But there was finally some technology in screw caps which said actually this could be better than corks, because corks had a tendency to spoil the wine sometimes if not stored well. So PUC Valley said, okay, we'll go out and do market research. So they asked all the visitors who came into their winery to say, hey, here's the wine. Would you care if it came in a screw cap or in a bottle with a cork? And they said, oh, doesn't matter, as long as you don't change the wine, doesn't matter, don't worry, everything will be fine. We love this. Screw cap, great idea, amazing. They said, great, okay. They went away, they launched it. They launched the new vintage in screw cap, and of course flopped, absolutely flopped, right? Why? Because people said, sorry, screw cap, we don't want it, we want the cork wine. If you put a screw cap in there, it means it's an inferior wine. And to which, what did the guys at PUC Valley say? They said, but you told us that you wanted the screw cap, right? So this is an interesting case study, because actually, and we discussed this in our wine course as well, there have been many reasons that have been given for the flop of the screw cap, right? To say, generally, these kind of technological innovations go from top down, not bottom up, right? So a technological innovation that's happened on a Mercedes S-Class can come to a Maruti, but an innovation that's happened in a Maruti can't go to a S-Class, right? That was one kind of conclusion that kind of everyone came to. But the problem was that the market research had been flawed, right? And the bigger flaw was actually seen later. And why was the market research flawed? Did any of you guys pick it up? You have thoughts on it? I'm actually going to see if you guys have thoughts on it, and I'm going to move to my charger as well while I do that. Yes, no? Did we read the thing? I was notorious for never reading these things. But anyway, so the flaw actually turned out was that the market research they had done was done on people who were visiting them. It was not done with a neutral group. It was done with people who had wine in their hands. They were at the PUC Valley winery itself. So they're absolutely enamored. Wow, look at this winery. At that point, you're asking them, would you care if this way or that way? They don't care. They're already the most invested wine consumers that you have, because they've actually made the effort to come to your winery, right? So market research can be very deceiving if not done right. Right? Prototyping in that sense to say, hey, screw cap, does this work? Sure, it works. But you have to understand the grander scheme within which all of this lies, and frankly, it's very difficult to understand it. And the only real lens that you can look at it is through is the retrospective lens, where you can look back at it and be like, oh, this is what we should have done. Right? For us, yeah, I mean, prototyping has been a big part of it. Right? Even till date, we end up prototyping. We end up creating new, gin flavors and taking it out to bartenders and saying, "Hey, what do you think?" When we recently came out with a coffee gin, in collaboration with Sleepy Owl, and we took that bottle out and to so many people, and everyone had their own input to say, "Hey, we should up the coffee, or you should lower the coffee, or you should make it fruity, or you should do this," and everyone you open it out to has more and more and more to say. So at some point you have to kind of distill all of that, and still follow your gut, right? To say that even within us, so we have a team of 3 distillers, myself included. Within us, there was an argument about how long should we steep the coffee? Should we steep it for 48 hours or 24 hours? I was saying 24 hours, and those guys who are coffee drinkers, were saying 48 hours, because coffee drinkers will enjoy it. Like, yeah, but you don't just have to look at coffee drinkers. I'm not a regular coffee drinker. I enjoy my coffee, but I'm not a regular coffee drinker. So I don't want that overpowering coffee flavor. So again, there was no real scientific way to, dispel this argument. We decided on 36 hours and we did 36 hours. Correct. Sometimes there's just a path of least resistance. That's pretty much it. Sorry, Yashraj says Facebook kept bringing in changes slowly because while people were mourning, they were mourning on Facebook feed itself. Yeah, exactly. We would end up doing that. We'd be like, why has Facebook done this? And the funny thing was, we would mourn for like 2-3 days, and a week later, we would look at that same change that's happened and wonder how people ever lived without it. How can you imagine now Facebook with a Word doc, on your profile, and you could go in and change everything or on anyone else's profile as well. So it was iPhone updates, notorious. And you're really lost after every time, you wake up one morning, you're like, wait, my iPhone updated itself. But that's market research, because here are people who've got massive teams who understand what consumer needs are. We don't have that. Our best chance at this is literally going out and asking people we know about, simple thing as, bhai sahab, aapko ye taste acha laga ya nahi laga? Does this go with tonic? Does it not go with tonic? Those kind of things. We're constantly experimenting. In fact, today we tasted something which I quite like. If this comes to market, you guys will know that you guys are the first ones to see it. We made a gin and jamun today. So, again, there's one that I quite liked, which is why I'm talking about it. And we'll see if it makes sense.
Prototyping is not showing it. It is giving it to us to drink.
Yes. I mean, this could have been possible had we done this in person, as was the original plan.
So Anand, considering we'll go into Q&A, and you brought out the aspect to say that somewhere you have to put a stick in the ground to say how much feedback you are going to take, because it will keep coming. People will have inputs. So can you give the class a little guidance on, what happens at what stage? Is there something that says, okay, stop, what we've got is good enough to now go into the real market, and still we'll improve the product with feedback? How does that work? How did it work for you guys?
There is really, like, I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I was the person of the 3 founders, who was saying, guys, we don't have time, right? Bottling date is coming up. I have to order the bottles. The bottles will not arrive in time. There was, if you've ever seen the Hapusa bottle, it's got this really nice deep purple tinge to it. And I was pulling my hair out. In fact, that's what's happened here. I was pulling my hair out because my wife and partner was not happy with the shades that we were getting on the bottle. And every time, and this was from a French company, right? So every time that the bottle would go back to them, they would charge me $1,000, 1,000 euros. I didn't have the money, nor the time for them to also take another extra month, send us something, and then us kind of not be happy with it. So I think you have to balance out everything. You have to keep, the business aspect of it in mind as well. So I won't say that you can just ignore that, because that's something, maybe your other partners don't understand. That, listen, there's only such a window that you have from a business side. But you also have to listen to your partners to say, we have to get this right. This is the one chance for us to get it right. So I'm sure I've taken off 5 years of my life in that thing. I've definitely shortened my life expectancy. But when you look back at it, it's worth it, right? So you will know. I think is the easy answer on that, and it might sound like a convenient answer, but you will know, because you will want to achieve the timelines that you have in mind. You will want to achieve this plan that you have in mind. The other thing I will say is, if you don't achieve the timelines that you have in mind, don't stress about it. In the grander scheme of things, it doesn't matter, right? You have 50, 60, 70 years ahead of you. I think it's important to, and wow, and I can't believe I'm saying this. It's important to have fun doing what you're doing. It really is. We are having a lot of fun. I don't know if you noticed.
It is very important to have fun doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think I speak to so many people who are not doing that, who are looking forward to the next thing, and frankly, I can't understand that. I've been in that situation myself, but I can't understand why you would not try and get out of that situation. I think when I was at Deloitte, I knew I was not enjoying it, and I knew I wanted to get out of it. Because I was working on a totally different team, by the way, before anyone gets ideas. I was working on a totally different team from your professor's wife. So I wish I was working on her team. Maybe I would have still been working at Deloitte. Maybe I don't wish I was in her team. But yeah, I think it's so important to enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not enjoying it, I think you still have to give it that time to realize that, okay, I've given it a serious try and I'm not enjoying it for X reasons. What might I enjoy, right? And then go for that, right? I really thought I would enjoy, being at Perch, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though from the start of the second week onwards, I knew there was this other project in my mind, which was the gin project, but did not stop me from enjoying all the time that I spent. And I spent a lot of time at Perch waiting tables, getting behind the bar, learning how to make coffee, learning how to make cocktails. So all of those things, right? Learning the nuances of coffee and cold brew at that time paid off now when we had to make a coffee gin. And I think it's about finding ways to have fun within whatever you're doing. And I think if you've done that, you're sorted. And I think one of the things that scared me was a TED talk I heard 5 years ago or something, which said that by 2040 or 2030, by the year 2030 or 2040, I think 80% of the jobs that are there today will not exist. So everything that we are thinking, that we are studying for, that we are learning, that we're growing towards, may not exist, right? So how can you prepare yourself for that kind of a world? It's very difficult. And I think the only thing you can do is kind of enjoy the moment, right? If you can do that, and if you can do that I can't say every day, it's very difficult to enjoy every day. But if you can do that every month and you say, hey, this was a great month, this is a good, I learned something. Maybe it was not the best month from a personal standpoint. Maybe I got COVID, or maybe, someone I know, something happened. But at the end of that month, if you can say, hey, listen, at least I'm headed in the right direction. Or I had fun doing that, I'm looking forward to this month. I think that in itself is a big win, right? There used to be this thing of having a 5-year plan in your mind. You'd sit down at an interview and someone across the table would ask you, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? It's impossible. I think if you can answer 5 months on from now, you're doing a great job. But I think, I think learning to be flexible and enjoying what you're doing at that time is really the best we can do.
Okay, so Anand, more for the class. I'm going to extend 10 minutes, 15 minutes more for Q&A. Because while I have a ton of questions, it's not about my questions. It's more about your questions that Anand can answer. So we'll add 15, 20 minutes to this and cut it out from elsewhere. So, Rohan, you go first, just because I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, packaging is a very important aspect of this industry. I just wanted to understand, what are the kind of decisions you make with respect to packaging? Like, what was sort of the consumer response to it? And just generally, if you could share like the secrets of the industry, because I really do think that sometimes, people will walk into a Theka and they'll see, let's say, alcohol that's priced at the same level, and the decision is mostly driven by, let's say, past experience or just packaging at that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, would love to know how you came about that process.
Honestly, I didn't realize how difficult that would be. Ron, thanks a lot for that question. I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be, because I'd always worked with brands where I'd been handed the bottle to say, hey, you're working with Glenfiddich, here's what the Glenfiddich bottle looks like. And you realize that the decisions that those guys made at that time was because of what was available, right? So you only had, a triangular bottle available. That's what they went with. There's a gin in there's a very, very iconic, not gin, but there's a iconic bitters called Angostura bitters. Have you ever seen that? It's a very funny looking bottle. Look it up. It's a bottle about, sorry?
It's really small, I think.
It's a small bottle, bitters bottle, about 100 ml, 200 ml. Yeah, that is a TT table. That's our work table. Sorry, I saw a message on the chat. But it's a small bottle, and it's got this really iconic look to it, right? It's got a full length label with the top, because the bottle itself is tapered, the label itself is crumpled on top of it. The story behind that is these guys ordered bottles, they ordered labels, the labels came, they were the wrong size. They didn't have the money to kind of go back and say, okay, reprint the labels for us. So they said, okay, we'll just apply it and we'll crumple the top, right? And it's become iconic.
Is that a true story, or you just made it up?
Yeah, no, very true story. Angostura bitters. It's the most.
I'm a regular user. I've never questioned why it's crumpled at the top, but now I tell the story.
True story.
Not at home, by the way, I think, for people who want to see it. I don't know if it's visible. Yeah. There's like a crumpled top. Yeah.
I can't see. Anyway. Yeah, it's one of those things that you never question, right? And you think, wow, some genius thought of this, right? And it's a total blunder. So when we also started thinking about it, you don't know where to start, because unlike those guys, the world is your oyster, right? You have so many options. Now, how do you decide which one you like, which one you don't like? Why do you like it? Why do you not like it? It's a bottle. They're all good. They're all nice. I mean, there were at least 20 that we said, ye bhi ho sakta, wo bhi ho sakta, but at one point we wanted to, put in a wine bottle, but then we thought the retailers might get confused by it. And why was I thinking wine bottle? Was because the price of a wine bottle was half of that was for a spirit bottle. So in my mind, I was like, I'm making the right decision. But then, retailers came back and said, "Ye to wine hai." We're like, no. So, yeah, we ended up choosing this kind of a bottle finally. Firstly, because we liked it. I think let's be clear. We chose it because we liked it, right? We thought clean, cool, looks fine, right? No one really argued about it. Every other kind of bottle, everyone was arguing about. This one, we said, okay, it's fine, nothing great. But the more we delved into it, we realized when we did our market research that this base being narrow and it being a fairly tall bottle actually meant it was very easy to grab onto for a bartender, right? The neck being short meant that it could hold a speed pourer, and actually this kind of a bottle was the best at holding a speed pourer. So when you flipped it, it wouldn't bubble through. It would actually like come out in one nice stream, which was great, right? If you're thinking of creating a pouring brand, that's ideal. You want it to come out really fast. We also realized that when gin originated, the bottles of Geneva at that time, as it was called, looked very much like this: tall, short neck. So we said, okay, those three things make sense. We'll go with this bottle. But first and foremost, we liked the bottle. We just liked the look of it, and that's it. Everything else, now when I look at this, and now when I look at some of the prototypes we did at that point, I look at it, I'm like, can you imagine, that would have been greater than? But I think it's more to do with the fact that now we're just so used to this being greater than. At one point, Hapusa, by the way, we were thinking this would be the Hapusa bottle, and the Hapusa bottle would be the greater than bottle. So, we were all over the place. And when I read that Phil Knight book, I realized we were not the only ones. So yeah.
Okay, Yash Raj.
Yash Raj.
Hi, so yeah, I have two questions. The first one being, when you were starting up, how do you get the right team? Because this is not your background. In a course that we did, a while back, entrepreneurship course, we had Mr. Ankur Bhatia of Jimmy's Cocktails. And he said that he didn't know how to sell a 99 rupee cocktail mixer. So he went out and hired the North India head of Red Bull, because that guy sells, 99 rupee drink. So how did you go about finding the right people?
Ankur is an interesting guy as well. We're doing a limited edition with him as well, where he's coming out with something. So fantastic guy. You guys have had some really interesting people coming on board. How did we find the right team? I think I had a very simple philosophy at that point. And I think we still do have the same philosophy. We wanted to work with people that wanted to work with us. So if you wanted to work with us, there's no reason why we shouldn't hire you, right? If you can prove that you really want to work with us. Because at that time, remember, and this is probably more true at that point than now, at that point, it was a risk that you were taking if you wanted to work with us. That was fairly risky because, here we were creating a gin in a category that, where gin is obviously the smallest category in the country, and we're creating a niche gin, that or premium gin. So it's a category that doesn't exist. So, by all stretches of the imagination, we are primed to fail. But really, I think at that time, everyone that I met, it was a case of culture fit. Will they be able to go out and talk to someone about, here's a gin. So even the finance person, for example, today is someone that he's not left, right? Our finance manager, not CFO. I couldn't hire someone like a Red Bull head. We didn't have that kind of money. So we ended up hiring one salesperson, one finance person, one distiller, and one person from my previous organization who I really liked. And he was the office boy there. And I said, listen, we don't have an office, but I really like, how you go around and get things to happen. So he became our merchandising guy, and he's still our merchandising guy today. He was making 7,000, 8,000 rupees a month at that time. He's making 55,000 rupees now. He's really proved himself. So I think it's a matter of finding the right people who believe in what you're doing, have that culture fit, and have that belief in the product itself, not just in what you're doing, but have the belief in the product. So we often do this. We often, when we get together for a team get together, we will do a cocktail competition amongst everyone. And the last time we did it, it was a finance head who won, and he created this thing called the Uttarakhand Spice Bomb, which was great, right? And that's the kind of enthusiasm you want to emanate from every single individual, and that's really what we look for. Yeah.
And sir,
great question. Yeah.
And have you ever tried any unconventional marketing strategies, because you're a startup and you got the right mix and everything? So I was watching this popular TV show Mirzapur, and just a connection to it, to increase the supply of their guns. They dumped the guns, people got addicted, increase in demand. If we relate it here, have you ever tried just giving a lot of your gin for free to, popular bars or to popular consumers, or in weddings?
Everything we do is unconventional. So what is conventional now is, finding, influencers and giving them lots of free product. We've never done that. We stay as far away from that as possible, because that has become the norm, right? So if someone comes in and says, hey, I'm an influencer and, I have X number of followers and stuff, ignore it, right? Stay away from that as much as possible. I think for us, it was, I don't know. I think it was creating partnerships that worked really well. Something like Sleepy Hour, for example, was a partnership that we've always liked. We had, so the first Gin Explorers Club. I think someone talked about this before. There was an event called Gin Explorers Club, And, you think, oh, you're going for this fancy kind of event, and, you're going to be served martinis and, like all high-end foo-foo stuff. And we said, we're going to flip that on its head. So we said, we're going to serve our gin and tonics. Every time you buy a gin and tonic, you get a samosa with it, right? Because for us, a samosa and a gin and tonic are the best possible pairing, right? No fuss about it. It's oily, right? The gin and tonic will cut through that. It's got, coriander seed in it, right? It's got a nice citrus food. Coriander seed happens to be one of our core ingredients as well. And it's something that everyone loves. So it is this perfect kind of pairing. You guys, next time you try a gin and tonic, try a samosa with it, a hot, fresh samosa right from the oil. It is great. And it was amazing because we were the top seller at that event by far. Because often people would just come for the samosa and we're like, here, take it, and you just had like a crowd gathered around us, just having gin and tonics and samosas, and people were just curious as to what is happening, right? We've never paid the premium. So you could pay a premium and get the central spot in that fair, in that event. We were in a corner on the first floor, right? Not even on the main floor. And even then we managed to get this kind of a response because of doing things which were unconventional. So I think for us, for example, in the trade front, we've always seen brands reach out to bartenders. We say, listen, what's the use of the bartender, right? In India, unlike the rest of the world, when a consumer walks into a bar, they don't walk up to the bar. When a consumer walks into a bar, they walk to a table. So you've got this bartender who's great at what he's doing or she's doing and everything, but they're all the way over there and you're all the way over here. And who are you talking to? You're talking to the server. The server is not someone that anyone's trained, right? No, none of the big brands are going and talking to servers. None of the big brands are trying to make the service community cool, right? Everyone's focused all their attention on the bartender because that's what works in the rest of the world. But in India, no one talks to the bartender, unfortunately. So what we've done instead is we've gone in and trained servers. We've gone in and empowered the servers and said, hey, here's how you guys can improve. Here's what we're all about. We're talking to them so that when they talk to the guest at the end of the day, it's so really it's about almost creating a list of what are the norms in your industry, right? And saying which one of these can be broken, which one of these actually have no place being a norm, right?
Okay.
Thanks, Rasha. Yes.
Just because we are a little short of time, Swarna, you're next.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask about how the pandemic affected consumer behavior, and particularly the industry and your brand, and also like how you guys modified or changed like anything to cater to the demand, and also if you could elaborate a bit about the supply chain and the inventory and everything.
So that's a big question. I'll try and tackle the first part of that, which is how has COVID changed what's happened. COVID, again, we've been in existence for just under 5 years now, under 5 years. We've been selling for about 4.5 years. So almost half of that now has been under COVID kind of restrictions. The good thing is we were able to get out before that, and we were able to go and take our gin to bars and events and those kind of things, and really be able to do a brand build, right? For us, for our industry, and for us as well, when you build a brand, when you open up a new state, you first go to the bars, right? Because at a bar, a consumer can walk in and order one gin and tonic, and if they don't like it, they can move on, right? So it's a fairly low investment kind of trial for them, as opposed to buying a full bottle from retail and going and taking it home and realizing they don't like it. Then what? They've got a full bottle with them, right? So bars are a great space for us to be able to build our brand, to be able to get liquid to lips, as we call it, right? What happened in the pandemic, of course, was the fact that the bar industry totally shut down, right? No bars. By that time, thankfully, we had enough kind of traction at the retail space. So even at that time, 70% of our sales came from retail, which means people were buying a bottle, taking it home, sharing it with friends, and that really became the liquid to lips kind of scenario. So that 70% overnight became 100%, right? All of our sales for the most part of 2020, 2021 happened via retail. Which just meant that our communication and our communication channels had to change. We focused a lot more at that time. We pivoted a lot to Instagram because here was finally the only kind of direct communication channel we had. We could not talk to them at bars. We could not talk to them at events anymore. We could only talk to them on Instagram. So there was a lot that we did on Instagram to keep it engaging, to keep it fun. But we were very careful of the fact that we didn't want to hand over our brand to an agency. Most brands you see are handled by agencies, right? Marketing agencies, social media agencies. And in my experience, they all end up saying the same thing, right? Rehashing the same thing because, if I'm working at an agency, my level of involvement is with 4 different brands and it's very shallow with each of the brands. So with us, initially it was me and Aparajita, my wife, running the social media. And when we finally got the money, we were able to hire 1 or 2 people to help us run the social media bit as well. But everyone is in-house. And everyone comes and spends a full month here with us at the distillery, learning what we do, understanding what we do, and all of that. So, I think the pandemic has been not as bad for us as it has been for the rest of the industry. I mean, we've really seen the worst of it from up close, right? So many people have lost their jobs because of all this, right? And so I can't be, I can't be carefree about it and say, oh, it's been great. Yeah, we've managed to grow. For the past 2 years, we managed to grow 100% in each of the year. So, all of that. I think our direct to consumer communication has definitely improved. It's gone up a couple of notches. If you see, and please, you guys should go and follow Greater Gin and Hapusa. I'll wait to see the numbers kind of go up. But we're trying to really keep it fun and interesting and engaging, and it's engaging because it's engaging for us. Why we even made the gin is because we like a gin and tonic. So it's a fairly selfish endeavor at the end of the day, and it's I'm glad I don't have to make Karela, something I don't like. But yeah, thanks for that question as well, Swarna.
Okay, I don't want to shortchange all the questions that are coming. Anand, I'm going to request you to cut down your answer time to 2 to 3 minutes. And guys, your question time to less than a minute. I want to accommodate a lot of people because there's so much of width to be covered. And first, let me share the bad news. You guys just lost the break. Okay, so sorry, but the break went away. Ridhima, you go next.
I'll try to keep it short. I was going through a website and I really like this hook quote, you have heard so many stories from far away India, now you shall be able to drink them. And I thought the positioning was really interesting, puts it as more exotic and a more, something is Ayurveda in the West. So that made me curious about who do you think your TG would be and how would you define your TG is one. And B, do you also have ambitions to expand global? So, and also whether you knew this is going to be your TG right from the beginning, or did you just figure it out while you were in the prototype stage? So, yeah.
I think we did. I think with Greater Than, we knew who we were going after. With Hapusa as well, we knew it was going to be a little bit more evolved audience, but we just didn't know if the audience even existed at that point. So with Greater Than, we always knew we were going to go for that, 21 to 28-year-old. All of you guys effectively. And I'm surprised we thought it lended itself to exoticism. So for us, I mean, that's what I liked about spirits and brands in general was that, the story tells, the label tells a story. So, you're effectively drinking, a story. And what we've seen with this TG is they care about what they put in their body, as opposed to, people in the same situation 15 years ago who were just drinking vodka to get drunk. That is not the case now. It is people are much more mindful about what they're drinking. And because of that, they care about learning about where the product is from, what practices they're putting in place. Is it supporting some farmer? Is it supporting local practices and everything? So we're very mindful of that, right? And because we've been part of that same TG ourselves, where we care about what other brands are doing, it comes very easily to us. Whereas, again, you look at a brand, and I'm sorry I'm taking that example, but you look at a brand like Jaisalmer Gin, which is run by these guys whose experience is in low end country liquor, etc. That reflects in their messaging as well, where it's been handed off to an agency and they feel it's all about royalty. Gin is not about royalty. Gin is about being able to connect with the ingredients that have gone in there, and for us to be able to go out and connect with our TG. That's the short answer. Okay, thanks.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Radhika.
Radhika.
Hello. So my question was along the lines of now that you've established Nao, how big of a concern is brand dilution for you moving forward? Because the way I see it, there are, very limited expansion options that Nao has on its board that doesn't lead to market that leads to dilution essentially. So for example, you could, for instance, delve into complements of gin, but then that sort of messes with your entire brand of creating just spirits. At the same time, if you delve into the whiskey segment, that also messes with your the impression you've created around your brand about whiskey, about gin in general. So how exactly is this a big concern for you moving forward, and how would you intend to tackle that?
I think at every stage you have to be totally aware of your own bandwidth. So in the beginning, when we were aware that there was only so many hands, we almost ignored Hapusa, right? Because we said we first want to build out Greater Than. So while the Hapusa recipe was ready with me before Greater Than, we didn't launch Hapusa for 8 months. So June 2018 is when we launched Hapusa. A bit of that is to do with all this back and forth that was happening on the bottles and the shades and me pulling my hair out. But a lot of that was also, I was just saying, let's give Greater Than time. And let's also realize that we don't have the capacity to handhold two different brands, right? They're two babies effectively that you're kind of putting out there. So we said, we'll do one first, then we'll do the next one. So we don't dilute ourselves in the market, that each brand has a strong impact and we don't kill ourselves in that process. So for us going forward, do I see us doing a whiskey? I don't know. But I can guarantee you that it'll only happen when I'm satisfied with what we're doing, or not satisfied, to some extent satisfied with where we are at the moment on the two gins. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Nice question. Sej?
Hi, Anand. So my question was a broader one. What developments do you see going forward in the broader alcobev space with respect to gin specifically? Because more and more people are asking for it. At least if I speak about bars in Delhi, so my dad is invested in a few of them, and what we've seen over the past year or so is that more and more people are asking for it, and a lot of bestseller cocktails are gin made. So do you see more competition coming in, more people coming in the space?
Firstly, tell your dad that you like Greater Than and that he must only stock Greater Than at his bar. But on a more serious note, yeah, we're seeing a lot more gin brands actually come in because obviously they've spotted the opportunity as well. And unlike what we thought initially, we weren't crazy, and there was actually an opportunity there. We've seen the gin market, the premium gin market actually go from, and when I say premium, I'm excluding the 200, 250 rupee gins, right? I'm talking about anything above that. So including all your imported gins and everything. The premium gin market was, when we started in 2017, at about 10,000 cases a year. Today, that same space is at about 150,000 cases a year within a span of 4 years. right? It's growing. The size of the pie itself is growing. So there's not so much infighting right now. Lots of new people are coming in with gins of their own, saying, hey, this is a gin from here, this is a gin from here, which is great. As I see it, we're not going to be able to build a whole category ourselves. We need others to come in to add voice, and add strength to that voice as well. So yeah, I think more people are coming in. Is it going to become more competitive? Sure, at some point. Right now, I think we have it easy because there's growing demand. And you really can't see the horizon as yet. So we're still in a blue ocean for that matter. But at some point, I'm sure it'll turn red, and that's when things start getting ugly. Hopefully, that time doesn't happen anytime now. And even when it does happen, it is still friendly, and we can all sit together and have a drink with each other as we do now.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Hi, Pratil.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you so much, Anand. I'm audible, right?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having this talk. It was a very new sector insight that we got. So my question is on the lines of innovation. Like innovation is very necessity in entrepreneurship to create a disrupt in the market. And so you're also continuously innovating like coffee gin, jamun gin, and whatnot. But don't you think like there should be a limit to innovation, because too much innovation might deviate you from your core product? And that, like, especially what I see in alc sector is like there are brands and then there are alcohol which are in the market on the shelf for years and years, and not much of deviation, because people like in India, I think like a huge chunk of society are looking for a price oriented and then the test oriented thing. So I was just thinking, like, do you think like when you have a good business setup, innovation should stop, because considering the market demand and the market size and everything that we are working in?
It's a valid question, because most people would hear that question and be like, how can you say innovation should stop, right? But it's valid, right? You have one good thing which is running for you, which is going for you. Why mess with it? Yeah, I mean, you have to weigh that up the entire time. You have to make sure that you're not deviating away. And I think to bring in the previous point as well, that you're not necessarily just diluting the amount of attention you're giving to your core brand, right? Anything else you do, I think the test for is that working or not is that actually able to support your core brand, right? Are you building a halo? Or are you building a totally different category itself? So when we launched Juniper Bomb, which was the first limited edition we did, we actually realized that the sales of Greater Than picked up. Right? Why was that happening? Because suddenly people were, when they were sitting around at home drinking with their friends, they were talking about a new gin that was coming up. They were talking about, I don't know, Samsara or Terai or whatever else, or Jaisalmer. And suddenly in that, we went back into the frame by saying, hey, there's this new thing that's come up by Greater Than. And just by that happening, yes, of course, some people went and bought that new thing, but but at least we remained in that conversation with new, people who were entering the gin category, who were probably having gin for the first time, and maybe they were skipping right to Terai or right to someone else. Whereas, this was a reminder that actually we are the gin the gatekeepers to the category, if you may. So I think you're right. It's something that has to be weighed out all the time. We also, for example, wanted to launch a limited edition for Hapusa. But so I've actually got that limited edition ready, and I've got the botanicals for that in my store for the last 7-8 months. But when we kind of looked at it, when we without doing market research, we kind of just looked at it and we said, maybe we need to spend more time to establish Hapusa as a brand before we actually launch a limited edition, because people will look at the limited edition and be like, all right, this is Hapusa. So you need to weigh it up. I think that's the short answer.
Thank you so much, Anand.
Okay,
Thank you.
Kapil. Ayush.
Yes, hi, Anand. Thank you so much.
I don't want to shortchange you guys, but please reduce your time of the question, and Anand, further reduce your time of the answer.
Yes, sir. I will.
Yeah, hi. So my story, my question was behind. You talked about the story, especially behind the Hapusa. How critical is that behind creating a brand and going ahead and talking about that particular brand. So how important is the story behind creating a big brand and making it big?
For me, it's the most important thing. I think, honestly, even the liquid comes later. If you have the best liquid and the story doesn't back it up, it's going to fail. I think, which is actually unfortunate, because you can have like a average liquid and a great story and will actually do well. So I think the story is so important, because you need to get people excited about what they're drinking, what they're consuming. And the only thing I will say is, if you have a made up story, sooner or later you'll get found out. So I think, yes, the story is important, but don't go making up stories just because you know that the story is important. We're in a day and age where everyone can peek behind the curtain through your Instagram, and they can understand whether what you're doing is right or wrong. And if you're doing something wrong, sure, you'll have great sales for the first 6 months, but eventually you'll be found out. So I'll keep it to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ayush.
Vivan. Hi.
Yes, hello. So quick question. I just wanted a little bit of insight on how like pricing works in the alcohol, sort of in the spirits industry specifically, like how you manage to is there a trade-off basically between your product and say pricing, because you sell for like $1,000-1,200, where a Terrai sells for like $1,700 and a Jaisalmer for 4,000 and 3K for Hapusa?
There is a lot to do with excise. So there is a exponential kind of, so if I was to increase my cost price by about 5 rupees, the impact it would have on the retail price is about 500 rupees. Maybe not 500 rupees, but at least 100 rupees, right? So 20 times your cost price. So I don't know if you're aware, Greater Than sells for 1,000 rupees in Delhi. It sells for 1,560 rupees in Bangalore. It sells for 850 rupees in Goa. Whereas from us, it leaves the factory at the same price to everywhere. So it is more to do with the customs duty and excise and all of that stuff. Sorry, excise duty, not customs duty. So yeah, so really it's input cost. So your cost of goods sold, which we've tried to kind of minimize as much as we can for Greater Than. But with Hapusa, for example, the cost of the bottle itself, the cost of the botanicals that go in there, all of that plays a massive part, and it augments massively, like I said, in a multiple of 20 by the time it gets to the MRP.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to exercise some Shivans. While you're welcome to ask the question, you've already asked one. And Anya, I think you already asked a question. Can I request? You have not? I see you nodding no.
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh, you did? Okay. So Shivansh, for later times, if I may. Okay, Tanupriya, you go ahead. Nitin, did you already ask a question? Okay, then, okay, that's a good button to press to raise your hand down. Okay, Tanupriya, go ahead.
Sorry,
You're on mute.
Am I audible?
Now you are. Go ahead.
So my question is that what is your strategy regarding, you have every year there is someone turning, a lot of people turning 21, and you have a lot of naive customers coming up. So what is your strategy regarding, because I am asking this question because I was fortunate enough to go for a wine workshop, and out of my 50 batchmates, 70% of the students did not like their bestseller, which was there in the wine workshop's bestseller. So what is your strategy in taste, and how do you change your variations accordingly?
I think for us, and this is a dangerous question, because then you're effectively asking me what is my strategy to attract 21-year-olds to the gin. So I'm going to say, I think
arrested, Anand, if you're not proper.
Correct. No, I think that's where really we've let it be. We've let the product speak for itself. And I know that sounds like a bit of a cop out of an answer, but really that's what went in, behind the gin itself. When we thought it up, I was 27, 28 myself. So I was very much, target audience. Where I said, listen, I can't afford a bottle of Hendrix every time I want to have a gin. I can't afford a bottle of Bombay Sapphire or whatever, but I still want a good gin. So really, I think it was the product itself, the cost value proposition that I think we let it speak for itself. And beyond that, it is our Instagram and everything we do. I can't say that there is one specific strategy that we have, and I'm not just saying it to be politically correct. I can't say there's one particular strategy I have to get people into gin and greater than as the first step.
Thanks, Dhanupriya. Anya.
Hi, Anand. I just had a very quick question, but it's on a broader, for a broader perspective in terms of so I want to know about how you think differently about your startup now, because it's been 5 years that you were into the business. So when you look back to when you started, do you think there was something you could have done differently, or maybe some mistake that you did when you started off that maybe helped shape your business in a particular way which you didn't think it would? So how do you think it could have been different then and it could make an impact today?
There are so many things. I mean, there are things that happened last week that I think would have been different. So 5 years ago is it's the wings of a butterfly. I'm absolutely actually stumped by that, Anya. I'm not going to lie. What could I have done differently? Probably nothing. I think let's stick to that. Let's not do anything different because I'm happy with where we are. Could there have been a different few things? Yeah, there could have been 1,000 few things that could have been done differently. But I'm happy with the people that have come on board. I'm happy with the products that we have right out there in the market. I'm happy with the fact that the gin category is growing. I don't think I should be asking for more.
Nice, contented entrepreneur. That goes against the grain, guys. Entrepreneurs typically don't, as I said in an earlier class, we are loony people. So there is always more, but we'll come to that.
I mean, from a selfish point of view, I could say I could have held on to more shares. I could have held on to more stake, more equity and all that. So yeah, that's the piece. But
got the right investors. You screwed up on that too.
I mean, yes. But maybe I'm saving you for another day.
You're right. Kirtan, go ahead.
Hi, Anand. Thank you so much for talking to us. One question I had for you is that how do you deal with the problem of spurious alcohol? And I think since our college is in Sonipat, we all know about this issue. And how do you think that the pricing of your
I think he's fading out.
Then turn off your camera. Your voice is not, your bandwidth is being eaten up. Turn off
you
your
got
camera.
the question, so maybe we can start answering and he can chip in later.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you get the question or should I repeat?
No, you'll have to repeat.
Spurious alcohol I got.
Yeah, so because we're in Sonipat where a lot of the alcohol is a bit spurious or mixed, if you say, and I wanted to know how your pricing affects that, because since you're priced very reasonably when it comes, as you said, right, you're right in the middle of the market, it's 1,000 rupee gin. So does that affect how much spurious alcohol there is? And
frankly, right in the beginning when we started off the entire thing, we were told you have to have a Gwala cap, you have to have a non-refillable cap. Because we're in that stage, right? You've opened up a couple of bottles and seen that, you can't actually pour the liquid back in. Which I always hated because, being behind the bar, I knew that, you turn the bottle around and sometimes it doesn't flow. And you have to shake it, bang it, and then it starts flowing. So I always knew we were not going to go down that path. Is that something we're going to have to tackle soon? Yeah, sure. We've grown from a brand that was doing 0 4 years ago to a brand that is now doing, this year close to about 50-60,000 cases. So, we're soon going to have to tackle that because, it's not a problem that small brands have. It's a problem that the guys like Johnny Walker have. And typically the brands which are priced higher, right? So the 3,000, 4,000 rupee brands, people will take the trouble of, taking that bottle, removing the non-refillable, putting whiskey that looks like whiskey, and then putting it back in, right? So that it's spurious, but it doesn't look spurious from the get-go. For a brand like us, the feeling was, and the feeling remains, that we may not be worth the while, right? But we'll still have to deal with it. In the meantime, we've stuck to not having a non-refillable, so you can just put your pourer right in, you put the bottle out, it comes right out. It's great. It's something we're going to have to deal with at some point. So far, touch wood, it's been okay. We've not really faced those kind of complaints, not even from Sonipat. So
that is a good one.
I see one final hand.
Yeah, hi Anand. I've had a great time listening into your insights. So this is a question my dad actually has. I don't have any question for you. He's asked, how come you decided to go with like a flavor palette which is more neutral as compared to your other competitors who have really, really strong tastes?
So that's a great, clean. So that when someone wanted to enter the gin category, the first experience they had was somewhat, clean. It was one that, you could really build your own flavors on. The idea that we always had was, we'll make a great gin, you have to make it greater, right? Because we're giving it to you, you're not chugging it straight from the bottle. You're making a gin and tonic with it. You're throwing in garnishes, you're throwing in mixers, you're doing all of that. So we want to give you a great solid foundation, which is what we did with this, right? It's the same philosophy that Bombay Sapphire had when they started in 1987, though theirs is even more neutral, right? Because they were appealing to a vodka drinker, right? We were appealing to budding gin drinkers. So for us, when we did our, and this is great because it comes back to prototyping. When we did our prototyping, we made sure that in the focus groups, we picked people who were not the people who've been drinking gin for, 10 years. We picked people who just started expressing their interest in gin, right? So we had to keep that in mind. We had to keep it very, very clean. With Hapusa, however, we could go crazy. Yeah, Hapusa isn't at all, juniper, like the base like London Dry Gin. Hapusa is very flavorful, so it's for that palate that is much more experienced with gin. And it's once you start with Greater Than, of course you can go to the Juniper Bomb, right? For example, which is far more like intense with regards to juniper, and it's for the gin geek. You can go to the coffee profile, the coffee side, and everything. But you can also go to Hapusa, right, which is a totally different palate and talks more about the Himalayan juniper story. But yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dad, for that.
No
question.
more raised hands. Anand, thank you. I hope you don't get beaten up for the extra time that you had to spend with us. But thank you very much. Any closing comments? Anything on, prototyping, on marketing, market research? Any closing comments you want to leave them? I'll give you 3 minutes, and then the students will have to suffer me talking about this, and we'll let you go.
I'm sure that'll be enjoyable. No, I think I've said a lot, and thank you so much for listening to me, guys, and for those fantastic questions. They were great. I think we continue to learn. I continue to learn every day on the job. The only thing, like I said, on prototyping and market research is it is crucial, right? You have to. You cannot undermine that. You cannot undervalue that at all. But at the same time, you have to make sure that at some point you stop listening, at some point you have to trust your gut to say that, yes, I've done all the market research I could. I've heard everyone that I could possibly do that. There will be some people I will be pissing off when I take this decision to still go in this direction. And that's fine. I understand the risks, because at the end of the day, if you fail, right, you have no one else to blame but yourself. You cannot blame the people who were sitting there in your focus group and saying they told me the wrong thing, right? Which is what happened with the wine guys. They failed, but you can't go and point fingers at the people who were part of your market research and said, no. If you succeed, yes, you have yourself to applaud, but you can be rest assured that all those people that were part of your focus group will let everyone know that it is their reason. It is because of them that you have succeeded. And that's fine, right? And you want people to be a part of that story. You want to take people along for that ride, for that journey. And it's a fun journey. If you do decide to take on the entrepreneurial role, it's a great journey. You will hate it. You will love it. You will not be able to take a day off. Even Republic Day, which was yesterday, you will constantly be giving, approving leave requests, wondering when your own leave will come. But that's fine, right? And that's the bullet you bite, and that's the bullet you enjoy. But if you don't, absolutely nothing wrong with that. As long as you enjoy working wherever you're working, in whatever role you're working, and if you don't, still give it your best shot, but also at the same time, try and find something that you like a little bit more than what you did before. I think I'll leave it at that, if that's okay.
Great. Anand, thank you very, very much. This was fascinating. Thank you for sparing the time, and thank you for all the effort that you put in to pull together some of these things.